President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Right Honorable Mr. Ambrose Dlamini, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Eswatini, Honorable Minister Paul Mpaze, representing His Excellency Mr. Paul Biya, President of the Republic of Cameroon, Your Excellency Madame Constancia Mange de Obiang, the First Lady of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Honorable Minister Madame Claudine Uwera, representing His Excellency Mr. Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, Honorable Minister Mr. Felix Molua, representing His Excellency Mr. Faustin Touadera, President of the Central African Republic, Honorable Minister Mr. Adama Kone, representing His Excellency Mr. Alassane Ouattara, President of the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire, the Right Honorable Mr. Francisco Obama Asue, Prime Minister of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Your Excellency Ms. Teresa Efua Asangono, President of the Senate of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Your Excellency Mr. Guaudencio Moaba Mesu, President of the Lower House of Parliament of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Your Excellency Mr. David Nguama Obiang, President of the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Honorable members of the Equatorial Guinea government, Dr. Akinwumi Ayodeji Adesina, the President of the African Development Bank, Honorable governors of the African Development Bank Group, members of Parliament of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Secretary General of the Party of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, members of the Diplomatic Corps and representatives of international institutions and organizations accredited to the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. Your Excellency Mrs. Koloma Njang Mbengono, Mayor of the City of Malabo, Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Executive Directors of the African Development Bank Group, members of the bank's senior management and staff colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vincent Mehele. I'm the Secretary General of the African Development Bank Group. I'm indeed pleased to welcome you to the 2019 annual meetings of the Boards of Governors of the African Development Bank and the African Development Fund. It has indeed been a long journey and a great journey to Malabo. On this auspicious occasion, I would like to express our profound gratitude to you all for kindly, favorably responding to our invitation. The theme of this year's annual meetings, Regional Integration for Africa's Economic Prosperity, is not just a nice political idea dreamt by several generations of visionary African leaders. It is indeed the foundation for a competitive African continent in the current economic world order. It is our hope that you will enjoy the plethora of events laid out for you in these annual meetings as our governors deliberate on what an integrated Africa means to the mandate of the bank group as a premier financial institution tasked with playing a pivotal role in the socio-economic development of the African continent. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I will now like to present to you the program of the opening ceremony. There will be a video clip from the bank group. There will be the welcome statement by the chairperson of the Boards of Governors of the bank group. And there will be a keynote speech by Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the bank group. And there will be a video clip from the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. And finally, an address by the President of the Republic. It is my honor to introduce the 2019 annual meetings opening video.
Africa, a continent of 1 billion people bursting with youthful energy and dynamic diversity. Africa, a vibrant, bustling environment that sets it apart from any other continent or investment destination. Regional integration, once a distant dream, fast becoming a reality.
How are you this morning, my brother?
Integrate Africa, a key bank high-five priority, is rapidly helping to break down barriers to the movement of people, goods, information, and services. Dynamic public-private partnerships are propelling Africa's economic transformation in ways that will soon make the continent the world's largest free trade zone. For 55 years, the African Development Bank Group has championed social and economic development, trade, and investment all across Africa. The bank's regional integration strategy will help improve infrastructure connectivity, enhance trade and investment, promote financial integration, and enable regional economic communities. Here in Kenya, prior to the construction of the Addis-Mombasa Highway, poor roads made access to markets difficult for local vendors and truck drivers who for years experienced severe financial losses.
Mwanzo nikianza kulikuwa na shida kwa sababu ya itatumia hata kama wiki mzima kutoka Nairobi mpaka Moyale. Alafu kutoka Moyale mpaka Addis tena ilikuwa natumia kama wiki mzima. Mimi huenda na kama masaa 24.
One-stop border posts such as this bank-funded link between Kenya and Tanzania are revolutionizing trade and the free movement of ideas, information, people, goods and services in unprecedented ways. Before 2009, there was not a single one-stop border post. Before 2009, there was not a single one-stop border post in Africa. Today, there are almost 80, with many more in the pipeline. The bank's Visa Openness Index, which measures the number of African countries not requiring visas for fellow Africans, shows an increase from 20% in 2016 to 25% in 2018. Freer movement of people means increased trade and prosperity for all. Substantial achievements are being made through increased regional integration. In just 5 years, the bank has invested more than $15 billion in regional infrastructure projects, including cross-border transportation, energy, water, and ICT connections.
Okay, approved, but maintain continuous listening watch.
The bank's funding of a new wing at Ghana's Kotoka International Airport in Accra will add much-needed increased capacity to this regional hub. The ultra-modern terminal in Kotoka will double the airport's capacity from 2.5 million passengers to 5 million passengers per year. The expansion is coming just in time as consumer spending on tourism and recreation in Africa is expected to double by 2030.
Welcome to Worldfish by Port, the preferred access to Southern Africa.
A newly expanded container terminal in Namibia is strengthening the region's position as a major hub to accelerate trade between the Southern African Development Community and the rest of the world. The bank provided 90% of the project's cost with a $300 million loan, which will multiply the port container's capacity by 33% and positively impact lives.
It makes me feel very happy because I will learn new technology. Salary-wise, it will also be a good thing.
For 16 landlocked countries in the region, access and connectivity to markets is still a challenge for millions of entrepreneurs and scores of persons working in the informal economy. With bank funding of 60 million euros, the Lomé Port Expansion Project is making a difference in the time and quantity of goods moving to and from the neighboring landlocked countries of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
Ça nous fait développer, ça nous fait augmenter notre revenu pour mieux nourrir ma famille, mettre ma famille à l'aise, prendre en charge mes enfants.
Beyond transportation and the hard infrastructure of tens of thousands of kilometers of roads and highways, airports and terminals, or cross-border power grids, the bank's support for regional integration also includes ICT and the soft infrastructure of financial and market integration. Intra-African trade, that is trade among African countries, has historically been low and is estimated to be between 14 and 18% of total trade. In comparison, intra-regional trade in Asia is 59% of its total trade. The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is a major remedy. It will remove or liberalize tariffs on 90% of goods and pave the way for intra-Africa trade of 50% of total trade by 2040. The African Continental Free Trade Area is just one part of a continent-wide plan for economic development and cooperation. Initiatives such as the Protocol on the Free Movement of Persons, the Right of Residence and Right of Establishment, and the Single African Air Transport Market will take trade, business, entrepreneurship, and the cross-border transfer of knowledge, goods, services, people, finance, and energy to a whole new level.
Antigamente fazia-se o trabalho de estar na placa, tentar ver se
In the past,
permitia que o voo saísse no horário. O aeroporto em si hoje em dia não tem absolutamente nada a ver com o anterior. Portanto, a minha vida melhorou bastante porque diminuindo o meu stress é óbvio que o meu ânimo entrando no avião já é diferente.
The African Development Bank is fully committed to regional integration that drives social and economic development. Over the next few years, it is anticipated that the bank will require approximately $12 billion to support regional integration that expands access to domestic and international markets, increases trade volumes and revenues, creates jobs, promotes development, and significantly reduces poverty. Whether constructing or rehabilitating more than 16,000 kilometers of cross-border roads, enhancing regional infrastructure networks, growing air travel for millions of passengers a year, supporting ICT projects that will soon expand internet connectivity to 30% by 2025, building one-stop border posts, sharing knowledge, or facilitating policy dialogues, the African Development Bank is delivering on Africa's regional integration aspirations and making a difference.
I now have the honor to call upon His Excellency Mr. Cesar Augusto Mbasogo, Minister of Economy, Finance and Planning of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, who is also Governor of the Bank Group for Equatorial Guinea and the Chairperson of the Boards of Governors of the Bank Group. Please go to the rostrum for your speech.
Su Excelencia Obiang Mbasogo, Presidente de la República, Jefe de Estado y de Gobierno y Presidente fundador del Partido Democrático de Guinea Ecuatorial, Excelentísima Señora Doña Constancia Mangue, Primera Dama de la Nación, Su Majestad Rey de los Soto, David Mojato Bereng Seiso, Rey de los Soto, Su Excelencia Presidente Tshisekedi de la República Democrática de Congo, Excelentísimos señores representantes de jefes de Estado y de Gobierno presentes en esta sala, Su Excelencia, Excelentísima Señora Teresa Efua Sángono, Presidenta del Senado Nacional, Excelentísimo señor Gaudencio Moaba Mesu, Presidente de la Cámara de Diputados, Excelentísimo señor.
His Excellency Mr. David Gema, President of the Court of Justice, Your Excellency Vicente Tomi, Vice President of the Council of the Republic, Your Excellency Mr. Marcelino Ngema, Ombudsman, Your Excellency Francisco Wamasue, First Minister of the Government, Your Excellencies, present in the room, Mrs. Koloma Ngamlingoma, Mayor of Malabo, the Secretary General of the party, Your Excellency Dr. Akiwomi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, Your Excellencies, governors, members, regional and non-regional of the bank, executive directors, authorities present in this room, ladies and gentlemen, in my capacity of Minister of the Economy and also the President of the Board of Governors, I have the pleasure of welcoming you in Malabo to meet in the annual assemblies, which are an important moment in our history. And I wish you a pleasant stay. My message will be based on the concept of resiliency. Last year, beginning with resiliency, we had 50 years of independence, and our history is a clear example of how to overcome problems. Guinea Equatorial has become, from being one of the most depressed countries in the beginning of the 80s, one of the poorest, to the country you see today, a country with good infrastructure, where quality of life for people has improved enormously, and a country that is living in peace with its neighbors. For all of that, the leadership of our president has been the key, and also responsible management of the oil resources and the determination of the people of this nation to live in peace. All of that has helped our country to become an example of stability, peace, and prosperity on our continent. I have spoken of the concept of resiliency because resiliency means the capacity that we need to overcome the traumas and continue forward. Equatorial Guinea is a country which, in our opinion, is a symbol of resilience. We are a resilient country, a country that has a control of its own destiny, and we have managed that thanks to the leadership of our president and the determination of our people to continue forward. A month and a half ago, we celebrated the third National Economic Assembly. We presented to the community, national and international community, the plan, which is the vision of our president and of our society. The vision we had in 2007 about what we wanted for our country. In that conference, we had everybody participating, and that's where we presented the plan. And it shows that the country has undergone a spectacular transformation, which has often not been seen by a sizable part of the international community. And now, in international assemblies, we have an opportunity to showcase it, show that our country, which is often not noticed, we are showing the fruits of our effort and the management of the government of our country, of the resources of the country. The second concept which I wanted to develop is the utopia, and I would like to quote a map of the world which does not include utopia. It's not worth looking at because it doesn't have the only country where the humanity always ends up And when it is discovered, you go forward again. Progress is the realization of utopias. This is the concept of utopia. The utopia in Africa was independence and the ability to control your own destiny. But it seemed impossible at first in the last century. But it was done. Now our utopia is regional integration, and the banks have the mission of bolstering that integration thanks to economic prosperity for the whole continent. The free trade continental area is already ongoing. 6 of the 7 main economies of the continent with a growth of 3.5% over emerging markets and other developing economies. But we also have challenges. The future is bright, but we have challenges about population growth. Shows that we need to create 55 decent jobs per day to the year 2035. The potential is enormous, but as I have said, the challenge is also enormous. That is why these assemblies we celebrate in our country with a motto of economic integration for the area are very important because they define what the bank is and what our continent is going to do. The celebration of these annual assemblies here in our country, in Central Africa, is crucial because for the different scenarios we have, the region that is going to benefit the most from this integration is our sub-region in Central Africa. That's why when we mention these assemblies, we've seen that it is a privilege for our country, but not only for our country, but for all the sub-region. We are opening our sub-region. We are showing what our sub-region is. And Equatorial Guinea has the pleasure of hosting these assemblies. I would like to finish with another quote, which everybody surely knows. It always seems possible until you do it. This quote is from Nelson Mandela. And what we'd like to say with it is that at the end of the 80s, the last century, regional integration seemed like a remote utopia, but now it is becoming reality. Our continent is integrating thanks to the prosperity of all African men and women, and the African Development Bank is our vehicle, our main locomotive for this regional integration, which will benefit everybody in Africa. For this, it is a privilege and an honor to host the Board of Governors, the annual assemblies of the BAD this year, right now, with these themes, and we trust that there will be a before and after in the history of our continent. With these two quotes, the one about utopia from Oscar Wilde and the one from Nelson Mandela, the late Nelson Mandela, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I hope you all will take time to know not only Sipopo, not only Malabo, but also other parts of Equatorial Guinea, because the transformation we are talking about is happening not only in Malabo, on this island, but in the whole country. Equatorial Guinea has the pleasure of hosting these annual assemblies, and we hope that your stay will be productive and pleasurable. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, the Chairperson of the Boards of Governors. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome the President of the African Development Bank Group, Dr. Akinwumi Ayodeji Adesina, who is apparently a AAA president of a AAA financial institution, to the podium.
Thank you. Excellence, Monsieur le Président Obiang.
Your Excellency, Mr. Obiang Mbasogo, President of the Equatorial Guinean Republic, our host president in the company of his First Lady, and I would like for you all to applaud the presence of the First Lady amongst us this morning. we do have many heads of states in our fold. His Excellency, the President Félix Antoine Tshisekedi, President of the Democratic or the RDC Republic. We also have His Majesty King Lexi III of the Kingdom of Lesotho, His Excellency the Right Honorable Prime Minister of the Eswatini Kingdom, and we also do have many heads of states that are properly represented before us this morning. We have the President of Cameroon, Mr. Paul Biya, who is represented by Minister Mombase. Also President Kagame from the Republic of Rwanda, duly represented by Mrs. Ouattara. Honorable Minister, the President of the Central African Republic, represented by Minister or Prime Minister Meroa, as well as the President of Côte d'Ivoire, duly represented before us by Minister Marakone. I must say that we do have so many important personalities here in Equatorial Guinea. We do have His Excellency Pascal Akswang, who's the Prime Minister of the Republic. Her Excellency Mrs. Asangono, Speaker for the Senate of the Upper House of Equatorial Guinea. His Excellency Mamba Mweso, the Speaker of the House of Equatorial Guinea. His Excellency Mr. Obiang, who's the Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, and the members of the honorable members of government in our fold, such as the Honorable Governor of the African Development Bank, the members of Parliament of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, the Secretary General of the MAPATI, or the political party of Equatorial Guinea, the members of Diplomatic Corps, representatives of international institutions and bodies accredited here, and we also have the Mayor of the City of Malabo and the members of the Board of Directors of the African Development Bank, the management of the bank, the board of the bank, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. I wish to extend my heartfelt welcome to you all. I would like, in order to welcome you to the annual assemblies or annual meetings of the African Development Group in this 2019 edition, will always stand as a privileged venue to share with you the points of views of the bank on the economy in Africa. And also, I must say, the activities of the bank are now being refocused on issues pertaining to education because they represent the future of our continent. The annual meeting of this year focuses on regional integration. 3 years ago in Zambia, the annual meetings had focused on the economic priority in Africa in terms of energy, supplies and resources. Last year in India, we've also focused on the priority to feed Africa. The previous year in South Korea, we focused on making Africa the priority of all of our development concerns, and now we are focusing on the fourth of the High Fives priorities, mainstreaming Africa. Your Excellencies.
Regional integration is crucial for Africa's accelerated development. We must connect landlocked countries to ports. We must allow free movement of people. Investors must be able to invest beyond the borders of countries. And Africa must trade more with itself. Apart and divided, Africa is weakened. Together and united, Africa will be unstoppable. We're delighted that you've all joined us here today in this beautiful country of Equatorial Guinea, a country you will find to be exemplary in terms of infrastructure. Mbasogo, for hosting this year's annual meetings and for your generous hospitality. Please let's give it up to the country for what they've done for us. Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate you, Your Excellency, Mr. President, on your new finance minister, a young, bright, and very dynamic 39-year-old economist who had just spoken before me, who used to be a former professor of economics in Spain. My interactions with him showed me that you made a very smart choice, Mr. President. By his appointment, you have demonstrated remarkable confidence in the youth as you build towards the future. Well done, Mr. President. The confidence of the youth can be found when I visited here a place called Tech Campus, an IT and coding boot camp right here in Malabo. There I saw dynamism, resourcefulness, and entrepreneurship of the youth at work and in action. The basketball stadium was jam-packed, not with basketball players, and so that you just know I'm a big fan of Toronto Raptors and I hope they win this game, but with budding young entrepreneurs. The Tech Campus is laying the foundation for what will become the Silicon Valley, or should I say, the Malabo forest of IT in Equatorial Guinea. Among them is Sigfredo, who developed a moving robot and wants to study aeronautics and robotics. 18-year-old Angelica, who created an intelligent stick for the blind and visually impaired. Mateus, who, inspired by the beauty of his country, designed an impressive online digital portal. Celso, who has a well-thought-out agribusiness idea for processing mangoes and avocados. And Quintin, who is developing a safety and security app for taxi users. And all of that being channeled and directed by a young lady called Olivia. The youth of Equatorial Guinea, just like in other parts of Africa, are the best assets that we have. Mr. President, right here, your youth are your best assets. Mr. President, keep up your determination to invest in the youth. Thank you. When I visited Equatorial Guinea a few weeks ago, and you so warmly received me, despite your having been bereaved at the time, I was so amazed with the level of world-class infrastructure, investments that have been made here for decades under your leadership. I encourage delegates to take some time to visit this beautiful country, amazingly beautiful country, and take in the depths of its vast development. In the process, you will discover, like I did, the Equatorial Guinea that, as they say, you wished you knew. We are delighted that several heads of state are with us here today, including those from Central Africa region. This region is endowed with vast amount of arable lands, forests, abundant water resources, and rich biodiversity, making it easily one of the world's leading treasures of natural resources. This is the first time the bank is holding its annual meeting in this critically important Central Africa region. In the past several years, we have invested over $13 billion in this region. And for every single dollar that we invested, the region has leveraged $36, which means an incredible rate of return of 36 times. Our investments have helped to construct the Central Africa fiber optic networks that connect the population with a faster and less expensive access to internet, and in the process, boosting business and regional integration. Our efforts to the Congo Basin Fund, and many of the donors are here, have helped to preserve forests and biodiversity. We are building a prosperous, climate-smart, and environmentally secure future for Africa. Today, Excellencies, a climate-resilient Africa is now urgent more than ever before. As we all witness the recent devastation that was caused by the cyclones in Mozambique, Malawi, and in Zimbabwe. The African Development Bank rallied support behind these countries by providing immediate disaster relief. And just last week, our Board of Governors approved $100 million in funding to support their rebuilding efforts. The global community must support Africa to adapt to climate change and ensure resilient economies for a greater future. And the future of the African continent is getting brighter. The 2019 African Economic Outlook of the African Development Bank shows general economic performance has continued to recover. Growth is projected at 4% in 2019 and 4.1% in 2020. This is a strong momentum from the growth of only 2.1% posted as recently as 2016. It is worth noting that 40% of African countries are projected to see growth of at least 5% this year, as commodity prices recover and domestic demand and infrastructure investments boost growth. There's excitement in the air on Africa's economic opportunities. And those opportunities are boundless. The newly minted African Continental Free Trade Area will make Africa the largest free trade zone in the world, with combined GDP of over $3.3 trillion. Pulling down tariff barriers alone will spur trade by at least 53%. And with the elimination of non-tariff barriers, trade could easily double. To help accelerate regional integration in Africa, the bank has been at the forefront of the development of critical infrastructure. Let me share with you some of our results. For at the end of the day, it is action and results on the ground that counts. Here in Central Africa region, the African Development Bank is financing the Nachigall Dam in Cameroon, supporting the development of the Inga Dam, and I was here this morning with President Tshisekedi. We're discussing that also in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And we will support Corridor 13 road that will link Congo-Brazzaville with Central African Republic and with Chad. These are all part of the African Development Bank's vision to integrate Africa. Through the African Development Fund, and it's a great fund, and we are grateful to our donors for that support, we finance the construction of the amazing Senegambia Bridge, a dream come true for Senegal and for Gambia, the Gambia. We are doing a lot to interconnect Africa and drive investments into the continent. The African Development Bank is right at the heart of making the African Continental Free Trade Area a success. Trade finance will be crucial for that success. The bank has already invested over $1 billion to support trade finance, which in turn has also helped to support 111 transactions in 43 countries and leverage $7 billion worth of intra-regional trade. We've invested another $1 billion in the Afri-Exim Bank, including $650 million for trade finance lines of credit and $350 million for trade insurance. We've also invested $630 million in the First Rand Bank and the Absa Bank, both of them in South Africa, to support the expansion of access to trade finance for 20 countries. Our work, together with the African Union Commission and the regional economic communities on the Africa Visa Open Index, continues to monitor how Africa is doing on the free movement of people. Progress, Excellencies, has been made, but much work still needs to be done. The Visa Openness Index shows that in 2018, Africans did not require a visa to enter 25% of the countries in the region. They can get visas on arrival for 24% of the countries, but they still need visas to enter 51% of the countries. To integrate Africa seriously, we should bring the walls down all across. The free movement of people, and especially labor mobility, will be very crucial for promoting investments. To accelerate investments and mobilize greater resources for Africa, the African Development Bank, together with its partners, launched the Africa Investment Forum. Held for the first time last year in Johannesburg, South Africa, the event attracted over 2,000 participants and investors from 53 countries around the world, including pension funds and sovereign wealth funds. The results were simply amazing. Investments worth over $38.7 billion were mobilized in less than 72 hours. Just listen to Canada's Chris McLean, the Chief Executive Officer of Shore Share Capital, a private equity fund with rising investments in Africa. He says, and I quote, "I have been traveling to Africa for over 20 years doing investments. I have never seen anything like the African Investment Forum. It created seismic shifts." A good example of such seismic shifts is the $2.6 billion deal by investors in South Africa to build Accra SkyTrain in Ghana. Also, the African Development Bank, Africa 50, and other partners signed a $500 million financing agreement to construct the first road and rail that will link the two Congos, the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Republic of Congo. And we are only just getting started. The 2019 Africa Investment Forum will hold in Johannesburg from 11 to 13 November, so please, mark your calendars. In 2018, the bank helped to finance and complete a number of major infrastructure projects that are very transformative, including 2 international airport terminals in Ghana and Senegal, and the regional express train of Senegal, the first in the West Africa region. And just to make sure that we're very supportive of the president there, one of my vice presidents, Amadou Hott, is now the Minister for Planning and Economy of the Republic of Senegal. I just want President Macky Sall to know that that is our equity investment in his government. We've provided $16 million to ECOWAS to support feasibility studies for the Lagos-Abidjan Highway. Our investment in the 1,000 kilometers Addis Ababa-Nairobi-Mombasa Highway is transforming trade between Ethiopia and Kenya, which has risen by a whopping 400%. Our investments to expand the Walvis Bay port in Namibia is opening up trade connections for several landlocked countries all across the SADC region, such as Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Zambia, and expanding trade volumes from 300,000 to 1 million 20-foot equivalent units. The bank's investments are making the road from Cape Town to Cairo a reality. Just last year, I had the pleasure of being with President Magufuli of Tanzania to inaugurate the bank-financed 251-kilometer road linking Dodoma to Babati, a critical missing link in the 10,288 kilometers Trans-Africa Highway number 4 that connects Cape Town, Lusaka, Dodoma, Arusha, Nairobi to Cairo. Rehima Tukai, who works in Dodoma, had great things to say recently about this road. With a broad smile on her face, she said, "Visiting my family in Kondoa on the road used to take me 5 hours. Now I get to see them in just a little less than 1 hour." We are doing more, though, than infrastructure. The bank is also supporting the integration of financial markets across the continent through the Africa Financial Markets Initiative, which is helping to link stock exchanges with a combined total market capitalization of $1 trillion. This includes Johannesburg, Nairobi, Casablanca, Windhoek, Lagos, and Cairo stock exchanges. As we connect nations through quality transport infrastructure, support ICT backbone networks, and financial markets, the bank is poised to further boost regional integration in which we have very, very strong comparative advantage. And so let me just be clear. Regional integration will be totally meaningless unless women, who form majority of the traders, effectively participate. To advance opportunities for women, the bank's Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa, otherwise called AFAWA, is being rolled out to leverage $3 to $5 billion, specifically Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, WIFI, that's for the World Bank, has just invested over $68 million in AFAWA. Now, this is very exciting for women across Africa because, indeed, when women win, Africa wins. To help Africa to achieve more, we have positioned the bank very well to meet the challenges ahead. I am pleased to report that since we last met in Busan, a lot has happened to your bank. The AAA rating of the bank was again maintained. I don't mean my own AAA, I mean the bank's AAA rating, as it has been for the past several years. We've always done that. Our loans to countries have expanded, and so have our disbursements. We are paying greater attention to the quality of our projects as we should. The bank was rated the 4th among 45 development organizations in the 2018 Aid Transparency Index report, a clear sign of progress made in ensuring greater transparency and reporting across all of our operations. The bank introduced several balance sheet optimization initiatives that have generated global attention, including the Room to Run instrument that sold off some of the risks on our loan books to the private sector in a $1 billion initiative, the first by any multilateral development bank globally. And it's not just about money, it's all about development impact. In the past 3 years, the bank, with your support, has steadily delivered significant impacts. It has connected about 16 million people with access to electricity, 70 million people with access to agricultural technologies to achieve food security, 9 million people with access to finance from private sector companies, 57 million people with access to improved transport, and 31 million people with access to improved water and sanitation services. Yet, Africa needs more, and Africa deserves more. The time is right to do more for Africa. We cannot postpone what is good for Africa always into the future. As Africa's bank, we will continue with your support to push for greater results, for more development and better quality for the life of Africans. That's why the African Development Bank is seeking your strong support for the general capital increase of its bank, the African Development Bank, the commercial part of the bank, and also for the replenishment of the African Development Fund, a crucial fund for Africa's development. We are grateful for the strong support you gave yesterday. We had a long meeting at the conclusion yesterday on the 3rd Governors Consultative Committee. And I want to thank all the ministers and the governors for that. We made great progress in those conversations. And in July, we will also meet with our donors for the 15th replenishment of the African Development Fund. Our shareholders, you, the member countries of the bank, you are our best supporters. Just like that remarkable effort on Africa's regional integration, your collective unity and support for the bank's mission is the strength of the bank. I am absolutely confident that you will put, as you always have done, the interest, the yearnings, the aspirations of Africa first, and give its bank, your bank, the African Development Bank, and the African Development Fund, the financing needed to help Africa achieve its desired development. As James Champy said, big results requires big ambitions. To develop Africa faster, African leaders are thinking big, and they should. Africa should not think small. Africa's own bank, the African Development Bank, should not think small. And its shareholders should not think small for Africa. It's not about what we can afford for Africa. It is about what Africa needs and deserves. Your Excellencies, governors, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Africa needs you. African integration needs you. And the African Development Bank needs you. Today, the African Development Bank Group is much stronger. It is fit for purpose. We will continue to reinforce our capacity, and we are ready to do more and to achieve greater results for Africa with your collective support. I thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your AAA doesn't need to be maintained, is always constant. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may we play the video from the Republic of Equatorial Guinea.
Do you know? Do you know that Africa has created the world's largest free trade area? Do you know that the African Continental Free Trade Area will be the future of African development? Do you know that in terms of economic potential and growth, Africa has never been more important on the world stage? 7 of 10 of the world's fastest growing internet populations are in Africa, a trend that will reshape entire economies as new companies leapfrog established technologies, ideas, and infrastructure. And do you know that more than 15 African countries have already banned the use of plastic bags and are taking measures each and every day to combat the massive threats of climate change? Ours is a continent of tolerance and cultural diversity. We don't just teach it, we live it. Ours is a multicultural continent of thousands of languages and several religions. We are like no other. Ours is an Africa of diverse nature, culture, tradition, and, as it has been said for millennia, the birthplace of mankind. Do you know that by the end of the century, 40% of the world's population will be African? Dreaming with ambition, we are the youngest continent in the world. We see and anticipate the future. Today, Africa, this continent of more than 1 billion people, has ratified a new continental free trade agreement that will integrate Africa economically in unprecedented ways. With the free movement of people, goods, services, energy, knowledge, and technologies, just imagine how far and how fast we can move across borders and accelerate economic development. Today, the African Development Bank and Equatorial Guinea welcomes more than 2,000 high-level participants to the 2019 annual meetings of the bank, including heads of state, finance ministers, civil society organizations, thinkers, policy makers, investors, private sector leaders, and numerous stakeholders from all the 80 member countries of the African Development Bank. We intend to bring Africa together far beyond this conference center. Welcome to Equatorial Guinea, a stable and peaceful country that welcomes you with warmth and tenderness. We are a young and ambitious country. We are building for our youth and for the future. We are changing social and economic paradigms. And we are building world-class infrastructure to create opportunities for investment and growth. We are building an Equatorial Guinea that will be an open door to the future of African development. Welcome to Malabo. Welcome to Equatorial Guinea. Welcome to Africa. 1 billion people. one future. We are making a difference.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to invite His Excellency, Mr. Teodoro Obiang Mbasogo, President of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, to deliver his address.
Su Majestad Letsi III, Rey de Lesotho. Excelentísimos.
Excellency Tshisekedi, President of the Republic of Congo. Your Excellency, Minister of the Kingdom of Tsodini, Your Excellencies, President of the Constitutional Organs, Your Excellency, His Excellency, the Prime Minister, and other members of the government. His Excellency, Mr. Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank. Honorable members of the African Development Bank, representatives of African states present at this meeting, distinguished representatives of civil society, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the people and government of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, I am pleased to welcome to this opening ceremony to all delegations of friendly and brotherly and sister countries which are participating in this 54th annual meeting of the African Development Bank, whose presence we value and appreciate as an act of cooperation and solidarity in pursuit of the development of our continent. We wish to convey to you the fraternal greetings of the people of Equatorial Guinea, and we wish as well for you to enjoy our traditional hospitality. We are here in Sipopo, in an enclave of our capital city that we baptized in 2012 with the name of the City of the African Union, in which you, delegates of all the continents, have gathered for the annual assemblies of the African Development Bank, since more than one decade ago. This place was the remains of a colonial plantation of sugarcane and cocoa that the forest had consumed completely. The city of Malabo, in colonial times, was a small fortress called Santa Isabel that served to export cocoa, palm oil, abaca fibers, sugar cane, cassava, bananas, etc., produced based on blood, sweat, and tears of the sons and daughters of this continent in a regime of forced labor that was far from the decent work that we all advocate today. Santa Isabel, as this colonial administrative enclave, was known before, which we later baptized as Malabo, also served as a neurological center of the colonial order that administered these lands, now known as Equatorial Guinea. Undermining the development aspirations of the natives and, of course, flagrantly violated all human rights contained in the Universal Charter of Human Rights. Here, as well as in the rest of Africa and the world, the colonized people were not human by birth. Therefore, they lacked every right by birth. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to welcome you to Malabo and to this enclave of the City of the African Union, Sipopo, because I know what it has cost us to have what you see here today. I am an experienced man who knows the history of this country, of Africa, and of the world. A few days ago, I turned 77 years, and please allow me to make a comparison of the facts. Ghana, the first independent African country that finally freed themselves from the colonial power, is 62 years old. Modern India is 72 years old. Hong Kong considers them free from colonization since 1997. The age and historical circumstances that I have had to live give me moral authority to be able to tell you the following. In the world in which I was born, if someone would have dared to say that in 2019 the colonial order would not exist, that among the fastest growing economies on the planet, the majority would be Africans, that the greatest diffusion of new technologies would come to African lands, that Africa would be preparing itself to be the largest area of economic and commercial integration on the planet, and above all, that the destinies of this country will remain in the hands of its sons and daughters. This person would have been branded as crazy and even cruel for such reflections. Colonial order was configured to last 1,000 years. You may read the history and study the historical documents. For this order, and thanks to the determination of people of good faith, brave and courageous people of this African continent and of all the African continents, this ideal was finally dismantled. And I do say formally dismantled because an evil such as colonization, which permeated all layers of the coexistence of humanity, politics, economy, culture, religion, etc., cannot easily be extinguished. It resists and tends to return with new disguises and new insidious words. We should know the history, learn from it, because the past is not easily to bury, and although the colonization was defeated, there still exist remnants and some people and institutions that basically still share this vision of the colonial past. Maybe they do not say it harshly because it is no longer politically correct or morally acceptable due to its facts, which can be easily recognized. In 2011, we opened a Sipopo enclave to host with dignity the African Union Summit, which gathered all African heads of states and governments and their institutions. We specifically built this Sipopo enclave to be worthy of Equatorial Guinea aspirations and the promotion of our union. Surely some ignore this or do not like to remember, but Equatorial Guinea, after it gained its independence in 1968, went through a few years that were characterized by destruction of the limited political and economic fabric of the colony. As was said by the African leader of liberation, independence was not given to us. We achieved it with the help of courageous people from all continents. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, colonization left us with a fragile structural system ready to vanish, unable to fulfill the aims of managing and sustaining a state. That is why we are destined to fail and to fight among brothers. We saw this in many parts of the continent, and the first years of Equatorial Guinea confirmed those fears. But even though we are still alive, during the 80s and until mid-90s, Equatorial Guinea headed the list of the poorest countries on the planet. Barely the international press mentioned suffering and misery of our people. With the exploitation of oil, the appetites that wake up the eyes were placed on Equatorial Guinea instead of asking for the past history of the country and for the horrors that we had suffered. The concerns focused on oil and whether the government would be able to manage the riches of oil, our wealth. As underage, we should not have decided on the use of our resources, and it should be others to come and decide what we should do with the oil. However, we convened the first National Economic Conference in 1997, a second in 2007, and just 1 month ago, we organized the third National Economic Conference. The first conferences aimed to discuss the use of oil revenues, and the recent one was to see how we would exploit the assets that the country has today, how we would integrate into the Sustainable Development Goals agenda and the Africa Agenda of 2063 in our policies of development. We mobilized resources for economic diversification and consolidation of social equity. All these conferences have been attended by civil society, state powers, private sector, and development partners, in which debates have always been decisive, open, and without restrictions. The representations of diplomatic missions of friendly countries and the representatives of international organizations witnessed 1 month ago how Equatorial Guinea discuss its development plans in a transparent and participatory manner. This is the mechanism that we have chosen to decide our development policies based on our resources. We accept a sincere cooperation without interference, and not that others tell us what we have to do. We have always been criticized for the use of oil money. Each step that we have taken has been worthy of criticism. Even this Sipopo enclave, when we built it, we were harshly criticized. The conference hall, the hotel, the golf course, the hospital complex were criticized. The artificial beach, they criticized the villas that were to host the heads of state and government. We did all of this for the dignity of our people and our continent, and that is why we call this part of Malabo the city of the African Union. During that African Union summit, a distinguished son of Africa was unable to attend the meeting as he had announced, because in his country there were riots and outbreaks of instability. I am referring to our brother and friend Muammar al-Gaddafi. A short time later, we witnessed what occurred in our brotherly country. Instability of a prosperous country and the consequences that we all know today: slavery, piracy, terrorism, plundering of the country, etc. The new government works hard to put an end to these evils, but the consequences are not only felt in Libya and other parts of Africa, but as in the entire world, as the fact of injustice. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am not opposed to scrutiny of others, but I do defend that this scrutiny should be for the good and not for the evil, not to destabilize and reverse development. We have been accused of despotism, waste, corruption, all kinds of evils, when all we have done is to preserve peace, political stability, and develop our country for our people, for Africa, and for the world. Due to the fact that development is a global aspiration, it is the responsibility of each and every one of the leaders of this planet who must assure the citizens of their respective countries in particular and of humanity in general to advance towards higher levels of well-being and development. Equatorial Guinea has been radically transformed from being one of the poorest countries in the world to become one of the highest per capita incomes in the continent. But development for me is not per capita income. It means expanding the possibilities for people to live in a more dignified life. During these last 10 years, following the guidelines of our national economic conferences, we have massively invested our resources in 4 areas, namely to provide the country with infrastructures, improve governance, invest in human capital, and to promote economic diversification. We have built ports, airports, public buildings, hotels, bridges, roads, social housing, schools, universities, etc. We have expanded our cities and created new cities and new poles of development. Electricity, gas, water, and environmental sanitation. We have created more than 50 rural communities. We have converted them in small cities called urban districts. We have reformed our constitution to guarantee better governance. We've diversified our oil industry. We have trained the staff of public administration, modernized armed forces, and sent our young people to be trained in 5 continents. Strengthened our international diplomatic network, supported and led initiatives for the development in Africa as the African Solidarity Trust Fund for Food Security, organized by FAO, with a contribution of $30 million in order to combat hunger, malnutrition, and food insecurity that affects our country. We have also financed the vaccine in order to eradicate malaria. We are committed to eradicate the barriers of development, to the development of the private sector, to improve living conditions of our population. And we have been in solidarity with the noble causes in our continent and outside the continent. But some call this corruption, waste, violation of human rights. But I call it development. And we are achieving this with the support and participation of our people. Who live in peace, with the solidarity of our African brothers and sisters who have helped us to abort several attempts of our enemies to destabilize our country in order to control our natural resources. Equatorial Guinea thanks to the understanding of friendly countries and international organizations that believe without restriction that Equatorial Guinea in particular and Africa in general deserve the opportunity to develop in peace. We would like you to visit more parts of Equatorial Guinea, to go to the other side of this island, to the continental region, and to the borders with Cameroon and Gabon. And you will witness that development exists everywhere in Equatorial Guinea, not just here in Sipopo and Malabo. We believe that it is a privilege to host these annual assemblies at a time when we begin a new policy of diversifying the economy and consolidating social equity. In the context in which Africa is preparing to boost regional integration in order to capitalize on our potential and an ambitious development agenda, the Africa 2063 agenda, in its global context in which humanity expresses itself with a single discourse of development, with political objectives of sustainable development for all. Equatorial Guinea is committed to regional integration for shared prosperity. We count on the African Development Bank to help us achieve economic diversification and consolidation of social equity. And we reiterate that everything that we have done in Equatorial Guinea is thinking of our country and thinking of our continent and looking at the world. We also have 3 reflections. One, for the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Adesina, and the ADB Board. Another, for governors of the African Development Bank who have gathered here in Sipopo, and the last one for all those attending these assemblies. To Dr. Adesina, President of the ADB and the ADB Board, we wish to say the following. The reputation of Dr. Adesina precedes him, an excellent job as Minister of Agriculture in his country, achieving what seemed impossible, to guarantee food security. We have closely followed his work as President of the ADB in charge of a directive and his boundless energy and the enthusiasm that he arouses. We encourage you to continue this way. Regional and non-regional partners of the bank to support a very noble cause, which is the development of Africa and of humanity. To the ADB governors present here, you will be discussing important issues related to the future of the African Development Bank and therefore with the future of Africa and of humanity. Be brave, as our dear Nelson Mandela said. It is always impossible until it is done. And I always wish to say that all physical impossibility is we're able to reach. You should also make decisions that may seem impossible to adopt. You should take these decisions because you will have to define the future of the African Development Bank. And you should do it thinking that Africa deserves the opportunity to develop itself and that the African Development Bank is the engine of this development. To all those who have come to our country for these assemblies, I wish to invite you to know our country, journalists, businessmen, ministers, governors, civil society. I invite all of you to know the true image of Equatorial Guinea. I wish to transmit a message to all of you. Equatorial Guinea is open to business so that men and women from our continent and from all over the world come, settle, and feel safe in investing for full development, for the prosperity of Equatorial Guinea in particular, Africa, and the world in general. To conclude, we reiterate our greetings of friendship to all the delegations participating in this assembly, and I conclude by declaring open the 54th Assembly of the African Development Bank. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency, the President. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Equatorial Guinea is open for business, and there is an open invitation to come, do business, and settle. No wonder the foreign minister said, I have earned a passport of Equatorial Guinea because of my constant coming here to organize and arrange for these annual meetings. So we'll come, Mr. President, and the world will come to Equatorial Guinea. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the opening ceremony. Permit me, however, to make some announcements before we leave the room. Immediately after this, there will be the high-level presidential panel in this room. After that, there will be a group photograph exclusively for governors, heads of state, and the special guests at the photo wall outside the plenary. Following the photo session, there will be a high-level luncheon hosted by the President of the African Development Bank by invitation. This brings the opening ceremony to a close. Muchas gracias. Thank you, and God bless.